Thank you so much. It's terrific to be hearing about these different interventions. We're going to be setting up for our next group. We're very pleased to have this session on community partnered approaches to early intervention. Involving our community partners is absolutely essential to having an impact with this research that we're doing here at UCLA and other places. So we're delighted here to have today Dr. Amanda Gulsrud, who's the head of our evaluation clinic, and Dr. Themba Carr, who is a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Autism Research and Treatment. And we're especially honored to have as a guest Loretta Jones from Charles Drew University, who is the CEO of Healthy African American Families. And we are, is that right?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. Sorry.
All right, and so we'll be showing the slides from there. So thank you, all three of you, so much for coming and joining us today. Thanks so much.
Study. I'd like to talk about a journey that was started about a year ago that was initiated upon the receipt of an Autism Speaks Early Access to Care grant that was awarded to Dr. Azari and Dr. Gulsrud. And in our initial implementation of that project, we realized that we needed to be doing some things differently. And that led to our partnership with Dr. Jones here, and that's what we will be speaking with you today about. I was struck when Dr. Jane earlier mentioned that the finding that many of us have heard, and that the time that it takes a research approach, intervention approach to leave the research clinic setting to the front lines in schools and in community settings is 17 years, and I think we're probably all in agreement that that's too long. And one thing that might help us to shorten that amount of time is by more actively engaging our community stakeholders in the process of research. And so our hope today is to really start a conversation. Okay. So what we'll do is I'm going to begin by presenting just some background on autism research and under-resourced communities, and then I will turn the presentation over to Dr. Jones, who is truly a pioneer in community partners versus for research approach. And then we will end with Dr. Gulsrud describing some of the partnered approaches that we've begun or have been doing and are now taking to the next level here at UCLA. So I know that a lot of us in the room are familiar with the initial paper from Leo Connor describing the small caseload of studies or families that he identified as having autism. And this paragraph here is actually from the very last paragraph in the paper, in which he describes the families who were involved. And this probably isn't the initial source, but I think it's one of the earlier sources that really promoted this misconception that autism and disorder only affecting families of high socioeconomic status. And so if you read in this paragraph, most of the families that he worked with were, as in his words, Anglo-Saxon descent, and they were all highly educated, highly employed. And from this paper and perhaps other experiences, we began to think of autism as a disorder that only affected one group of people. We know today that that is certainly not the case. Autism does not discriminate. It affects families from all socioeconomic backgrounds. And what we have found, however, is that there are disparities. Thank you.
This is really weird to do.
When we look at access to services, we find that families of lower levels of education, lower financial income, and those of racial ethnic minority have difficulties accessing these autism services that we work hard to develop. This is especially seen in terms of diagnosis. This is a finding, a table presented from David Mandel and his colleagues, in which we see that African American and Latino children in particular receive their diagnosis of autism at later ages than their Caucasian counterparts. For African American children in particular, this might be the third diagnosis that they receive. So often receiving a misdiagnosis of something as like conduct disorder or ADHD beforehand. These disparities also exist in terms of treatment. This graph represents work that I did during my graduate stint at University of Michigan And we found that even in a sample of families who saw signs early and who were able to obtain a diagnosis for their children at the age of 2, when they went out in the community to then obtain treatment services, there's a gross disparity in terms of how many hours African American families were able to receive versus their Caucasian counterparts. So there is a access problem both in access to treatment resources and diagnostic resources in the private sector. And I think you can argue that we also see discrepancies in participation in the research sector. This paper, which was presented by Nigel Pierce and colleagues, looked at 3 major autism journals and was simply looking at the report of ethnicity of the participants. And what you found was that many researchers are not reporting ethnicity of research participants, and in particular are not reporting ethnicity of ethnic minority participants. And I think that it may be a case of simply not reporting it, but possibly what's happening is that participants from these populations are not even participating. So we have a problem in the research field in that we're having difficulty engaging a wide range of families. This is further exemplified. This is a table from the Autism Genetics Research Exchange, and it shows you the ethnicity of the probands and families involved. And you can see that the vast majority of families were Caucasian. We have smaller amounts of African American, Asian, Native American, Native Pacific families. So we have an engagement problem here in research, and it's one that we need to think about and get creative about our methods so that we really have involvement from a wide range of families, because we know that all of these families are affected by autism. One approach that I think might be a good direction to head in is that of community partner participatory research. And very briefly, this is an approach. It is, Dr. Jones will tell you more, but basically a branch off of community-based participatory research. And it is truly collaborative approach that actively involves all partners in the research process and recognizes the unique strengths that each brings. It is different. There are some distinctions between community-partnered research and community-based research. In community-based research, which I don't need to discount, I think we've learned so much from projects that occur outside of the research setting, outside of the research clinic. But there's still some things that might unintentionally create barriers to true active collaboration and participation. In community-based research, you find that the research is often directed to the community, and community hasn't been involved in the development of that research process. More of a top-down hierarchy in decision-making versus in a partner approach, all members are at the table and participating. One thing that I think is really important is thinking about what happens when the research is complete, and that oftentimes we conclude our studies with a paper that's published, but we don't go back to the families who are participated and bring the results back to them and get feedback from them in an iterative process then moving forward. And that's something that community partnered research really emphasizes as a tenet of that approach. I think that a CPR approach is especially important for ASD because, as I've said, most current intervention studies have only included predominantly white middle-class populations. And we have to think very carefully about whether we can take these well-tested methods that have only been applied within a small subset of our population before disseminating them to the broader population. I'd like to turn now to Dr. Jones and have her really describe some of the central tenets of CPR.
Well, thank you for letting me come to see you today. And I want you to smile and feel good about yourself. So kind of like give yourself a wiggle for a minute. Fall asleep, because this morning I listened so carefully and I heard so much, and I said, how come this is not in my community? Why are these things that you did that are so important back in communities? What about the brain imaging? You know, how many people know about brain imaging in communities and know about genomes and all of the things that you talked about? You left it. It's here. But is it going to go back? And so, looking at what I talk about all the time when we go to communities is, what I know, what I know I don't know, and what I don't know, I don't know. And if you can see that circle, there's a whole lot I don't know that I don't know. And so when we're talking about autism in communities, there's a lot of things in communities that communities have no clue on about autism. So they don't even know that they don't know these things because they've only heard that autism is bad, that autism is stigma, that people who in the community, the myths are that if you're an autistic child, you're crazy, you're mentally deficient. So they don't have the real information. So if you don't know, it's not going to change things. We want to change the paradigm. So the difference between CPPR and CBPR, and I have to tell you, UCLA, I love you to death, but I know that there's a lot of signs in the community that says UCLA in the community. You've seen them, don't you, haven't you? Nice big signs. But guess what? It's UCLA, got an office in the community. They have UCLA employees there, and they have no community people walking in the door. So that's not UCLA partnering in community. That's UCLA living in communities. So you want to be able to think about why it's important that we don't use the word subject when we go out to the communities. Language is like really, really important. Universities must be willing to build the community capacity for understanding. This morning was a good example. If someone built the capacity on brain imaging for communities and put it, not dummying down the language, but putting it in a way that it's able to be acceptable for communities, that would make a big difference. And then you'd have communities who are willing to work with you. Because most of the time what we do to communities are, we work on them, we work for them, and we walk to them. But how many times do we think about working with? And partner participatory research says that you kind of have to work with, partnering. So I talk about equity and equality. And I like this slide because we have been talking about equality for years. In the last 50 years, I think we've had civil rights, and we've been asking for equal. But guess what? Does equal work in communities where the need is greater? It doesn't. Oh, I'd like someone said no out loud. Thank you. So we want to take a look at what's fair. And if you look at these kids and asking for, equality, there's a kid there that can't see the game. Because the box is the same size as everybody else's box, but the poor child's not big enough. But if you asked for equity, here he is, he has 2 boxes. And the young man that didn't need a box didn't have to have one. Next. This circle model of influence is a way in which NIH decided that it liked this model so well that it adopted it. And you can go and look at it on video conferencing at NIH. They did it for the RO1s and RO21s. I actually went there and taught it, so I know. And what it says is that the partnership, which is a small cog, and resident experts. Who knows what a resident expert is? Oh, come on, folks. Pardon me?
Someone who lives there is an expert?
That's an expert, yes. Moms are experts. Community-based agencies, the teachers in the community, they're the experts. So when we talk about things, we really want to make sure that when we're making the goal setting, we have resident experts, the partners, and the community at the table. And then we also always want to do the planning together. And then we want to take and get the roles and responsibilities out there. And then the last thing we talk about is sustainability and dissemination. If all of the information that you did today stays here, did you hear me? What did I say? If it stays here, you did not disseminate it in communities. Therefore, communities can't engage and work with you. Next. Everybody has a hand? Can you hold it up for a minute? This is your new tool. I heard this morning they were talking about tools, but this is your new tool today. This is the vision, the valley, and the victory. And if you look at your hand, it's kind of like 3Ds. So if you have a vision in your research and you take it out to the community, but the community doesn't buy that vision with you, there is no vision. And then if you tell the community you want it to work, for free especially, and you don't want to work, you just want the community to do the work, it's not going to work. So here's the valley, and the valley starts here, and I was telling a Mandarin folks on Tuesday, how hard it was, because we started up here, and we're now down here, working, and it gets hard. So we're working on the Valley. This is where the work gets done. Both sides have to do it. And then the victory has to be that both the community and the university researchers have to win. Your papers can't be the only win. You have to have something in community that wins. We talk about sustainability and capacity building. We cannot do either of those things if we don't do what? Share. So vision, valley, and victory equals value. Next. Okay. You're there.
All right. I have a gigantic light shining right in my eyes. Do you have it that bad? Okay, I'm going to scoot over a little bit. Is it okay? Can I go over there? Am I all right with you guys? Okay. I'm going to just stand because... So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take a few minutes to just do a brief overview of the types of community partnered work we have ongoing at UCLA, in the hopes that we can invite you all to the table to join us in our efforts, because that's really the spirit of CPPR, and it's what has taken me on a wild journey in the last year or so since meeting Loretta and Healthy African American Families, and we really want to share that with you. So a couple of projects, Dr. Chang actually earlier did an eloquent job of explaining this study, so I'm not going to spend much time on it. But the idea is using these principles of CPPR and truly collaborating with community. And community is in schools, and our children are in schools. LAUSD, has 14,000 children in that district alone on autism eligibilities. So we are partnering right now in LAUSD. It's amazing. Great collaborative partnership where we are going in and we're doing things like remaking recess on the playgrounds. We're doing things like helping paraprofessionals learn about engagement in the classrooms. And this has been an amazing effort on the part of my colleagues, and we've also extended it to other states and other programs. We're in the Bronx right now, and a really important piece of that is that we're working in low resource communities. We've really tried to make an effort to do that. We're also funded by HRSA in an Autism Intervention Research Network on Behavioral Health, which Dr. Dean and Dr. Kretzman talked a little bit about. Again, this is an example of our work where we're looking to implement novel interventions and really deliver them in the communities that need them most. Let's give back to community and think about making things equitable in community. And these families have not received the high quality types of interventions that some of our families on the West Side, for example, may have better access to. A really exciting new venture has been also bringing state-of-the-art genetics research into community. So Dr. Dan Geschwin that spoke earlier, he's partnered with Special Needs Network in South Los Angeles to examine the causes of autism and to look specifically at low resource communities and African Americans in particular. You saw that pie graph from earlier, where it's a very small amount of ethnic minorities who are represented in genetic studies, and we need more. And so he's embarked in this, countrywide effort, and we are one site doing this. And one important piece is that we're also wanting to understand the odyssey that the parents have undergone in trying to get a diagnosis, in trying to get access to services, and understand truly the challenges that these families are facing. And I conduct some of these interviews, and let me tell you, I have families who say they've gone to the pediatrician 12 times and did not receive a diagnosis. In some of our lowest resource communities, this can be commonplace, and it's tragic to really hear about this. So we want to do something about it. So we have partnered with Healthy African American Families to do just that, to try to make a mark and a sustainable mark in community. And this is a picture of one of our work groups here. And we meet monthly, and we are working towards a shared vision together. And that vision right now has been threefold. We were able to pull together last October a community conference where, from our work groups, what we found out is that what community needs, it's to know what autism is. And there's a lot of communities that don't even know what autism is, and the awareness isn't there. And there's a lot of stigma, as Dr. Jones was talking about, that interfere with the ability to detect and ultimately to intervene to help families. So we collaborated in an amazing community conference in South Los Angeles, reaching out to families who need it the most. We also have ongoing work groups this is the part where I invite you all to join. You can come to that table from the last slide and contribute your voice to how we really are going to deal with a large systemic problem that we're facing that's getting larger and larger. And if we don't change our practices, we're going to be in big trouble. And lastly, we're actually taking all the information. We're not just gathering information, we're constantly developing as well. And so our goal is to develop a sustainable intervention in community that is by community and for community and with community, where we can really truly impact families and providers and those medical professionals who need it most in these communities that really haven't had equitable access. So here's our flyer from our last conference, and the only reason to see this slide is that you see Dr. Jones talked about the win for everyone. All those people down below there, those are our partners, and there's a shared win in doing this type of work together, and we're really proud of it moving forward. And the conference was well received. 250 people in attendance, packed Holman Church down in South Los Angeles. Really high interest in what we're doing, and it really served to kind of initiate this effort for us. And this is a different slide. And so I'm going to skip over that last slide. It was just data. But what we found is that there were three main. What we did is we surveyed everyone who came to that conference, and we said, what is it that creates a barrier for you in the community to understanding, diagnosing, accessing services? And there were three main themes. There were a lot of themes. It was a really rich conversation, but a couple that we were thinking about is definitely stigma. In different cultural groups, working with different individuals, there's a real fear in community of what autism means and what it will mean for the future. And so there's sometimes some protecting of family members who may appear different. And so that may be contributing some to the delay in diagnosis. But we also know that there's difficulties accessing a very broken system. Especially, I've spent a year trying to figure out how referrals happen and navigate around South Los Angeles. And I've worked with the regional centers, and I've worked with the practitioners to understand, and everyone, we're all so fragmented, and no one seems to be communicating together around what is the pipeline for identifying children and getting them access to services. Most families are waiting 6 to 9 months for these types of appointments. And I'm talking about low-resource communities. In particular, these are where my stats are coming from. Again, isn't acceptable, but it's a big problem we need to work together on. So, just in closing, there's a lot of published work on this model. This is just one example of that, and we welcome you to come with us and share in this journey and ask questions about what this means. It's been an incredible learning experience for myself, and I know my partners here. And we have one more slide, but it's not showing up here. But what I think we're going to do is we're going to talk through it, right? Because for whatever reason, it's not here. It is our. Do we want to do this? Our closing thoughts. Yeah, let's do it. We have a few words that we were going to talk about, and it didn't get transferred onto the slide deck. Do it? Okay. So the first words, we have a few words to leave you with, and we think it represents kind of our journey here in community. And the first is improvisation and thinking on your feet in community. And as a researcher who is used to conducting clinical trials, you have to flip the script completely when you go into community. Chuck out most of what you think you know, because like Loretta said, you don't know an awful lot. And so if you can improvise and keep optimistic, you're doing well. So improvisation, just pretend it's up on the slide.
Resiliency. You have to take and build on resiliency in communities. People tend to say at-risk communities, low disadvantaged communities. You cannot build on a disadvantaged community, but you can build on a resilient community. So changing your words makes a big difference.
The next words are connectedness to others, and coming from the world of academia, we've learned that it's not enough to just show up in community. You truly have to enter with an open mind and be open to learning about the different families and people that you're meeting, not just about autism, but their entire experience as a whole, and being open to that bi-directional exchange.
Spirituality, and it has to be not religiosity. I want to be real clear on that. Spirituality is being able to believe that there's something greater than yourself.
And emotional vitality has been a lesson that, again, those of us brought up in academia have really learned a great deal from in the past year, and that's the concept that this isn't an easy process. This isn't a straightforward process to research that's going to be tied up with the research questions, methods, results, conclusion. It's not that simple. And so as we sometimes might find ourselves feeling bogged down in this approach, we must find that strength and that emotional vitality to return, because that's where the real work is going on. I hope that we've conveyed that to you today.
Gallows humor. You have to be able to laugh. I'm going to tell you a little story so that I can leave you laughing. There was a husband and his wife, and they were watching television, and it became 10 o'clock at night, and he said, "Honey, it's time to go to bed." And she says, "Yes, dear." And he runs up the stairs and gets in the bathroom, puts his pajamas on, and jumps in the bed. Gets his book, and he's sitting there. And she's sitting on the foot of her bed, and her dresser is facing her on the foot of the bed. And she looks in the mirror, and she says, "Honey, look, I have flabby arms." He said, "Uh-huh." She says, "Oh, darling, my breasts have fallen." He said, "Yes, dear, I love you." She says, "Oh, my God, I have cellulite." He said, "Uh-huh." She says, "Honey, my belly is sitting in my lap." He said, "Yes, dear." She said, "Honey, please, 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 tell me something about me that's special and good." He says, "Darling, I love you so much. You have the best eyesight in the world." And last but not least, we want you to remember that the message and the messenger that you take into communities are very, very important. If you don't take the right message and the right messenger, it's not going to work, and you tend to leave communities with more distrust than trust. Thank you.